So coming back to this criteria, relying on the explicit or ultimate discourses and not on the implicit or relative or conventional discourses. It's important, and but at the same time, we should not interpret it in too rational a manner. We have to understand its spiritual message. Understanding it again in the spirit of the earlier of the four criteria. What is that? Relying on the meaning, the spirit, and not just the letter. Now, talking about this criterion of relying on the nītārtha, not neyārtha, that developed in the course of the so-called development of Buddhist thoughts. Now, as thought, you mustn't be confused. As Buddhist thought, we have to recognize that there is a process of development, and that process continues even today. You know, today, scholars or practitioners expound on the Buddha's teaching according to their own insight, their own experiences. They write books, they give lectures. You know, you learn in your courses. And so you have the so-called Buddhist thought, Buddhist philosophy. Yeah? And certainly is that this is a development. Even though, as I said, as Dhamma, as ultimate spiritual insight of the Buddha, it's wrong to speak of development in this sense. So the two things mustn't be confused. So now I'm talking about the process of development of Buddhist thought. Now we know, for instance, that the Abhidhamma teachings were developed, you can speak of development, a little bit later than the Sutta and the Vinayas. We have plenty of evidence to show that. But again, be very careful what you mean by later. Certainly, you can say the essence of the Abhidhamma, the concern, the methodologies were already existing in the time of the Buddha. But as a codified canon, a Pitaka, a specific collection, you know, you have the Vinaya, the Sutta, the Abhidhamma. So you have three collections, so-called three baskets, three Pitaka, the Sam Chong la, Kinh Lun, Lun jo hai Abhidhamma. So as a codified specific collection of the canon, you can speak of the composition being a bit later, but in terms of you know, the essence, the considerations underlying, the concern underlying this development, actually also you can trace back to the Buddha's own teaching. So whether you can say the Abhidhamma was actually directly spoken by the Buddha or not, it depends on your perspective. Certainly, for instance, in the northern tradition, they recognize that they have, for instance, the Sarastivada also have a canon of 7 Abhidhammatic like the Pali tradition, but they say that that certainly these teachings are collected from the Buddha's teaching. In that sense, Buddha-Vajana. In that sense, actually they were spoken by the Buddha, but in terms of composition, they admit that these compositions were ordered by different human authors, and they named them. So each of the 7 texts in their canon has a master, has a teacher as the name of a particular text out of the 7. In a way, that's more reasonable. And it's also wonderful to understand that, because they recognize that in essence it is actually from the Buddha, but in terms of composition, you know, whatever you look at it, especially in the northern traditions, they were not even in of course Pali, for instance. They were in later Prakrits and at least partly Sanskrit. They couldn't have been composed spoken by the Buddha himself directly. So there is a process of compilation. Now, in this development, the one important point they make is that they say, yes, Abhidhamma is a development, but it is in a sense as important as, for them, you see, as important as the sutras. That again depends on the kind of a temperament of the Buddhist. You know, some are more into Abhidhamma, others are more into Vinaya, others are more into sutras. And they have equal right to make their choice this way. You see? Today also we have different temperaments, different capacities. So those who choose to be concerned with you know, the Abhidhamma text, believing in the value, they really have to fight with those who say, no, forget about Abhidhamma. You know, all you need is sutras. Sutras, sutras, sutras. Go back to sutta, you don't need Abhidhamma. Today also we have the same argument in the 20th, 21st century. And people often ask me also, I happen to teach Abhidhamma as well, and people ask, isn't it necessary to learn Abhidhamma? Isn't it superfluous? If we go back to the Buddha's sutta, we know everything. But then be careful, you see, are we really capable of understanding all the teaching of the Buddha? We need guidance. And we find guidance in the commentaries. We find guidance in the Abhidhamma text. And what is more, this commentary, particularly the Abhidhamma text, particularly the canonic Abhidhamma text, I would say, they represent, you know, the genuine effort on the part of ancient practitioners who were actually practitioners. They were meditating, and they have their realization, they have their faith in the tradition, and they reflected on their meditative experiences, they reflected on the teaching from the tradition, from the gurus, and, you know, they systematize, they try to make sense out of these traditional explanations, and this come to be known as Abhidhamma. We need this traditional wisdom. That's where tradition is very important. Again, there must be a middle way. We cannot be blindly attached to tradition, but we must recognize, we must be aware of the importance of tradition. Without tradition, there cannot be any true religion. That's for sure. Talking about this point, you know, I'd like to give you another example in the northern tradition. You know, there were many different types of controversy. You know that, especially in the northern traditions, among the Abhidhammikas. And Abhidhammikas are those who are concerned with Abhidhamma studies. They really believe that Abhidhamma is very, very important, and they refuse the charge that Abhidhamma is not Buddha Vachana. Buddha Vachana means the words of the Buddha. They say, yes, Abhidhamma is Buddha Vachana, actually, because it represents the essence. What is the criteria? The criteria is that they say Abhidhamma represents the nītārtha, talking about in terms of this particular reliance that we are discussing today. Abhidhamma for them represents the nītārtha, 就係了義經嚟嘅，係經啊，唔單止係經，係同埋係了義經，因此就好重要啦。所以你唔好話我淨係識得經就得㗎，點需要論啫？我哋太驕傲啦，關我哋咁嘅。咁驕傲起嚟咧，就嗰啲寶貝就我哋就唔得到啦。Sorry, I was using Chinese. I sometimes couldn't help. It came spontaneously. You know, so this for the so-called Abhidhammikas, the so-called specialists, you mustn't think of them as scholars in the modern sense. What I'm trying to say is that they were practitioners. They have faith. You know, like I give the example of Buddha Goswami himself, Buddha-Dharma, and all these great acharyas. When you look at the writing, you know that you can sense that they have commitment, they have faith, that they stand up, you see, for their tradition. That's a wonderful thing. We need that. That's something that we have to learn, whatever else. And likewise, we see in the northern tradition, you see. So these masters were, in the Sanghapatra, for instance, Vasubandhu, we know that they were extremely religious. And they were so well versed in meditation. Look at Visuddhimagga, and look at other texts in the northern traditions, Abhidhamma-kosa Bhashyas. You know, for instance, Abhidhamma-kosa Bhashya, we look at it, the largest portion of expression is on meditations and attainments. Meditation and attainments, therefrom. And the insight that can be gained as a result of meditative attainment. That's the whole structure, basically. Whole structure, the main structure of Abhidhamma-kosa Bhashya. I'm speaking about China, Sanskrit text. So we always must remember these masters are not scholars in the modern sense. They are scholarly, but they are not mere scholars. They are, to begin with, practitioners. That's why I often said, you know, if people sometimes think of me as a scholar, for instance, you know, and they, of course, in the university everybody calls me professor, and the student continue, and everywhere else they call me professor. Some call me Bhante. But I tell them that for me, first and foremost, I am a Buddhist. Secondarily only, you can speak of me as maybe a scholar, maybe a professor. So, in that way, we have to understand the traditional Abhidhammikas. Now, I don't exclude the pure scholar who study Buddhist philosophy, who study Abhidhamma in modern time. That's a different matter. But within that tradition, particularly the ancient tradition, all these masters were great practitioners, fully committed. I was talking about Vasubandhu. I talk about Buddha-Goswami, and also Vasubandhu, and also Asanga, and also even Sanghapatra. This is very interesting. You see, they respect a certain group in their text. In Sanghapatra was one of the most brilliant, most admirable exponent of the Buddha's teaching, and he's certainly one of the most inspiring from my point of view, and I'm very impressed with his basically clear-mindedness and with his intellectual capacity. But when I read his text, I can sense his faith and commitment very clearly. I'll just give you one example. For instance, you know, he in the midst of a huge, you might say, philosophical, intellectual argument. There are a lot of arguments. Arguments sometimes can be very good also, you see, and argument, questioning, bring out the truth sometimes in the process. So in the midst of a huge argument with the opponents, you know, the opponents are the Sautradikas, and the Sautradikas are those who are opposed to the Abhidhamma text. They were the people, not just in modern time. There was a group of people, and Sautradikas represented this group, who said the very word Sautradika means the sutras were the basis. We don't need the Abhidhamma. So there were a lot of controversy, arguments between these two, if you like, camps. So So the Sarastivada Abhidhammikas on the one hand, the Sautrantikas on the others. So in the midst of this huge argument, the Sanghapada say, wait a minute, it looks like we are not going to be able to settle the issue. You have your point of view, I have my point of view, but let us respect and treasure the insight of the meditators. It's wonderful. And the meditators are called yogacharas. They講我哋而家拗嚟拗去都冇辦法啦，冇辦法解決呢個問題。但係我哋咧唔好忘記咗瑜伽師，瑜伽師就係嗰啲打坐修行嗰啲。瑜伽師佢哋從體驗中得到結論係咩？我哋以嗰個為主啦。So he referred to the authority of the Yogacara. There are other examples also like that, you see. So let's discern that. So Yogacara, if the Yogacara is not in a Mahayana sense, not that word Yogacara in Mahayana sense. Yogacara simply means meditators or practitioners. Have for centuries, he said, understood from the inside, meditated inside like that. We can't simply overturn them, thinking that we are so clever. That's what he meant, you see. So it was wonderful to see that. In fact, also in the Mahavibhasha was the great commentary that was composed starting from the pre-Christian era, and it had taken a long time, and the final shape, right, was attained around the middle of the 2nd century, 150, around that. So there was certainly at least a period of nearly 1 century, during which time a lot of doctrines and arguments and decisions and ascertainment came to be recorded in that so-called great commentary, Mahami great Vipassamika commentary. Now in that, I want to say that you have this group of meditators. They figure there frequently, and if I'm not mistaken, it occurred something like 89 times. That by name itself, Yogacharas, the very word, it has nothing to do with Mahayana. They certainly were early Buddhists, and they were meditators, they were practitioners. And you see that these Yogacharas were highly respected in their commentary. And their commentary, don't forget, were compiled by the kind of the scholarly components, scholarly community of their sect, of the Sarastivada sect. It's a very, very close sect, by the way, for those who have not heard about it. A very, very close kind of a branch, you see, of the Theravada, that is the word for Theravada. So their teachings were very close to Theravada actually. And actually I suggest often that if you want to really ascertain certain questionable interpretations and so on in the Theravada, I think we should go into the Sarastivada also. Anyway, so I was saying that in the Mahavibhasha, in that huge commentary, translated by the Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang into 200 fascicles. So it's like an encyclopedia, right? We see these meditators figuring prominently and highly respected. Highly respected. They are not so interested in arguing with others, but their opinions were consulted, were considered by the scholarly components. Of course, this, as I said, the scholarly components, scholarly community, scholarly masters, they themselves were not just mere master in the modern sense, right? So the whole, briefly speaking, the whole development of Abhidhamma was inspired by this consideration that we must rely on the explicit teachings, explicit sutras, and not the implicit sutras. So for them, they consider the Abhidhamma as explicit sutras. Sutta here meaning a discourse of the Buddha. Yeah. In a broader sense, not in a narrower sense. That is, when you say sutta, if you look at, say, the ninefold division, you have the sutta, the Gaya, the Vyakarana, like this, you see. And in the Pali tradition, you have the so-called ninefold division, Navanga, and in the northern tradition, you have Sutra, Gaya, Vyakarana, and it goes like that. And there are 12. Now, all these 12 or all these 9 are, in a broader sense, sutras, but they were teaching of the Buddha. They were discourses. But you can see that they assume different genre, different style. Sutras are basically, or were at least originally, basically concise teachings, you see. And the Gaya were a teaching in verses, just like the Gatha and so on, and of course there are other distinctions. We are not concerned with those distinctions now. It's very interesting to study into them. And Venerable Yinshin has made a very insightful study on this. And for instance, the original signification of Gaya and Vyakarana, the signification of the first three anga, first three divisions, in contrast to the others, and so on. So today is not an occasion to discuss on this, but just to tell you that all these different forms of recordings of the Buddha teachings are actually, in a broader sense, discourses. And in a broader sense, you could say that they are sutras also. That's how the Abhidharmikas claim. And they were, in fact, the Abhidhammas represents the Tapa Sutras that are of ultimate significance, and that is nītārtha. So they say, yeah, we absolutely fully respect the sutras. The sutras actually, in fact, for us too, were the basis of our understanding of the Buddha teaching. But then, in order to understand the nītārtha, the actual meaning of the Buddha's wording, we need certain methodology, we need certain criteria, and that's why we develop the so-called Abhidhamma. In that sense, the Abhidhamma is the pramana, is the very mean for us to understand whether a sutra is actually indeed a sutra in the ultimate sense, in the nītārtha sense. Right? So you can say that from the period of the development, at least from the period of the development of the Abhidhamma onwards, the Buddhists were very conscious of the distinction between neyārtha and nītārtha-sūtra, the 了義經不依不了義經. Subsequently, you may say that in the development of Buddhist thought into Mahayana and different schools of Mahayana and so on, everybody was talking about this. Everybody. Yeah? And for instance, the Prajnaparamita school of thought, they would say, yeah, the teaching on emptiness is ultimate teaching. And the early teachings were not explicit. At least the emerging a group of what later can be called early Mahayanists were advocating in this way. So the Prajnaparamita Sutras or Mahayana Sutras came to be the nītārtha, and all the others are not, are mostly neyārtha for them. Okay. Now, you come to Yogacara. Before that also, because don't forget that you have the Madhyamika, but whether you can say the Madhyamika was established before Yogacara or not, it all depends on how you look at it actually. Usually we assume that first Madhyamika, then Yogacara is not quite right also. I have spoken on that earlier. Again, we don't want to enter into this, but this is to just indicate generally the development of Buddhist thought, right? So by different schools, some who advocate the position that the Buddha, the ultimate teaching is everything is empty. The word shunyata became a prominent word, you see. And then to say that all the sutras, all the not only the sutras but all the other texts that speak of everything being empty, that is true teaching, there is ultimate teaching, others are conventional teachings, and of course all this is based on yet another distinction between what is called teaching at the absolute level and teaching at the conventional level, right? We know that, and what they call samvritti satya, that is relative or conventional truth, and paramartha satya, Chai Kong, that is absolute truth. Chai Kong呢就係世俗諦同埋聖義諦或者第一義諦啦，呢個分別啦。So for instance, in Nagarjuna's teaching in the Madhyamaka Karika itself, Nagarjuna says that the Buddha's teachings were given at two levels. He said explicitly the conventional level, the samvritti satya, and also the absolute level. So for them, the teaching of emptiness pertains to the absolute level, and therefore all teachings and all subsequent scriptures that advocate the doctrine of emptiness in their manner, they are the explicit teachings. Then came along, if you like, I don't take this this chronological suggestion too literally, too strictly, but you can say that they came to be Buddhists who were later known as the Mahayana Yogacaras. Now then they said, no. Actually, the Prajnaparamita, not the Prajna, but those who, the works, the commentaries, the Shastras that explained emptiness in the manner of this Shunyata school of thought, they are now, for them, they are implicit, they are not explicit. Here now we present the explicit ones, and that is their text, their position, the so-called Yogacara. It's a long story. So the point is that starting from Abhidharma, they say, yeah, definitely the sutras are important, but then we have to make this thing between neyārtha, implicit, explicit. And Abhidharma represents the explicit teaching, explicit sutras. Then you have other schools. Whenever you have a new school, they always want to show that their scriptures represent the nītārtha, the discourses or the teaching that were of ultimate significance, not relative teachings. So when you come to, for instance, the Yogacara, then they say, yeah, you can't really say everything is empty in a literal sense, that it's one extreme. Nor can you say everything exists, that's the other extreme, like the Abhidhamikas, you see. Absolute truth, ultimate really cannot be empty. They give their reasons, of course. But relative things, conceptualized things are empty. So therefore, understanding this way is the middle way, and our teaching is, or any writing that express that this kind of position, our position, are ultimate teachings. So it goes like that. Therefore, this has become a very, very inspiring, very, very important criteria in the whole history of the development of Buddhist thought. I think today we'll stop here.